September 28, 2011 was a Wednesday for most people, but for MLB fans and players, it was the final day of the regular season. And with historical comebacks, chokes, and records set all within the course of a few hours, this particular late September Wednesday became perhaps the wildest day in MLB history. So let's look back at it.
Totally sports-esque. Majorly.
Before looking at these wild few hours, let's meet the cast of September 28, 2011. The main players here are the St. Louis Cardinals, Atlanta Braves, Tampa Bay Rays, and Boston Red Sox. And the supporting cast that were hoping to become the spoilers featured the National League Houston Astros, the Philadelphia Phillies, the Baltimore Orioles, and the New York Yankees. These 8 teams and 320 players would all play a role in this day, and the fun would all start at 7:05 p.m. But, of course, we need to go back to August 24th. On that day, the Cardinals were just swept at home by the Dodgers in a 3-game series, bringing their record to 67-63, putting them 10 games behind the Brewers for first place in the NL Central and 10.5 games behind the Braves for the wild card, dropping their playoff odds to 1.3%. That night, Chris Carpenter and other veterans held a closed-door meeting to discuss current events and the future of the team. Bill DeWitt has also said around this time they considered trading Lance Berkman to the Rangers. And for the Rays, they actually won that day in extra innings against the Tigers. But the Red Sox won as well, putting the Rays 8.5 games behind the Red Sox for the best record in the AL East and 7.5 games behind the Yankees for the wild card. The Rays' playoff chances were more than double that of the Cardinals at 2.8%, but this wasn't the lowest the odds would get, as a week and a half later, on September 3rd, their playoff odds dropped to 0.5%, and no team in history had overcome a 9-game deficit in September that the Rays were facing. And though the Cardinals had raised their playoff odds a little over that week and a half, they still faced a 7.5 game deficit. So for both of them to overcome these deficits, just like any team that makes a late season comeback, 2 things had to happen. They had to play great, and the teams they're chasing had to play not great. And as you may guess, both of those things happened. The Rays would beat the Red Sox in 6 out of the 7 games they played against each other over the next 2 weeks, and despite losing 3 of 4 against the Yankees after their series against the Red Sox, they tied the Red Sox for the wild card on September 26th, thanks in large part to the Red Sox going 5-16 from September 3rd to the 26th. And in the NL, after the Cardinals swept the Braves on the 11th, they were 4.5 games behind. And after the Cardinals went 9-4 while the Braves went 5-7 over the next 2 weeks, the Cardinals were 1 game behind on September 25th with 1 series left. The Cardinals had the good fortune of playing the worst team in the league with the Houston Astros, while the Braves had the misfortune of playing the best team in the league with the Philadelphia Phillies. The Cardinals split the first 2 games while the Braves extended their losing streak to 4, meaning the Cardinals and Braves are tied going into the final day. And after the Red Sox split, and the Rays extended their winning streak to 4 in the same time, the Red Sox and Rays were also tied, setting up for an exciting finish on the final day, which was September 28th, 2011. After a long losing season, if there's one thing that can motivate a losing team as they reach the final stretch, aside from receiving millions of dollars to play a game, that's playing the role of the spoiler. And on this September day, the Astros, Orioles, Phillies, and Yankees all had that chance. Of course, the Yankees and Phillies were in a different position because they already clinched their division, but nonetheless, they of course wouldn't mind ending the seasons of their division rivals. And the Phillies had another layer of motivation that night as they were going for the franchise record in regular season wins that was held by the 1976 and 77 Phillies. And that night started at 7:05 p.m. because baseball games can never start at a normal time. That first pitch was delivered by David Price, and as the Yankees scored the first run of the game, the Braves and Phillies and Red Sox and Orioles got underway, while the Cardinals and Astros still had another hour before their start. And just like the Rays, the Braves found themselves down in the first inning, but after a Chipper Jones sac fly, the game was tied. John Lester looked good for the Red Sox in the first 2 innings, and the Red Sox and their fans' spirits were lifted higher when the news spread that Mark Teixeira hit a grand slam in the second inning to put the Yankees up by 5. Putting the Yankees' win probability up to 89%, and this would only grow as the Rays continued to be shut down by Yankees pitching. Meanwhile in Boston, the Red Sox would find themselves behind in the 3rd inning, but after Marco Scutaro scored on a balk in the 4th and Dustin Pedroia hit a solo home run in the 5th, the Red Sox were back on top, with a 61% chance to win. And in Atlanta, a 2-run home run hit by Dan Uggla in the 3rd gave the Braves a 75% chance to win. And as the Red Sox, Braves, and Yankees' chances of winning continued to increase, the Cardinals and Astros finally got underway, with the Cardinals aware that to continue their season, they would probably have to win, as a Braves victory seemed likely. And immediately, they got to work, starting the game with 5 straight hits and putting up 5 runs in the first inning. And after a 1-2-3 first inning by Chris Carpenter, the Cardinals already had a 90% chance to win. And as the Cardinals continued to cruise, going up 7-0 after the 5th, their 99% win chance matched the Yankees, who were also up 7-0. And in Atlanta, the Phillies cut their deficit in half in the 7th, and after Johnny Venters got out of the jam he created, the Braves had an 87% chance to win going into the bottom of the 8th with a 1-run lead as Craig Kimbrell warmed up in the bullpen. And if September 28, 2011 is a movie, then this is the part where things get very interesting. Lightning struck in Baltimore in the 7th, causing the game to go into delay, and all the Red Sox could do at this point is wait it out. But they had to be confident knowing that even if they ended up losing this game, they would at least get one more game as a Rays loss seemed inevitable. But those hopes dwindled when the Rays showed signs of life after loading the bases with no outs in the bottom of the 8th. And while the nerves picked up for Boston, they weren't near as high as the nerves for Atlanta. After a single and a strikeout, Kimbrell gave up 2 walks. The bases were loaded in the bottom of the 9th with 1 out. Chase Utley was coming up, and panic was ensuing. After taking a pitch, Utley hit a fly ball to left field that was plenty deep, and that scored the tying run. And as the Cardinals held on to that 8-run lead, word spread to Houston, which led to cheers for Cardinal fans in Houston. And while Atlanta fans let out some boos as Kimbrell was taken out of the game, in Tampa Bay, fans were ecstatic as their playoff hopes were back well and alive. After loading the bases with no outs, the Rays would score 3 on a walk, hit by pitch, and sac fly. Then, with 2 runners on, as rain continued to fall in Baltimore, Evan Longoria would hit a 3-run home run to left to bring the Rays within 1. The Rays were still down after the inning, but after a 1-2-3 top of the 9th, they could sense that things weren't over. Meanwhile in Houston, despite being the last game to start, the Cardinals and Astros game was the first to finish after a complete game shutout by Chris Carpenter led to an 8-0 win, meaning the Cardinals were guaranteed to at least play a game 163, and all they could do now is sit in a locker room full of champagne and suddenly become massive Phillies fans. They cheered as the Phillies escaped in the bottom of the 10th, while the Rays went into the bottom of the 9th with just a 19% chance to win, and the chances would drop all the way down to 4% after a flyout and a groundout. And as the tarp began to come off in Baltimore, the Rays' hopes were down to pinch hitter Dan Johnson, someone who hadn't got a hit since April. Johnson would find himself down 1-2 in the count before taking a ball and fouling off a pitch. Then, on the 6th pitch of the at-bat, Johnson would send the ball down the right field line, clearing the fence and sending the most beautiful park in the world, Tropicana Field, into a frenzy. The Red Sox were dealt a crushing blow as they picked up their game, but they still had a lead. And just like every game being played at the time, nothing but zeros would be posted on the scoreboard as teams continued to escape jams. That is until the top of the 13th in Atlanta. With 2 outs and runners on the corners, Hunter Pence, who really had no reason to be playing at this point, stepped up to the plate. Then, on the 5th pitch of the at-bat, Pence made weak contact on an inside pitch that was just enough as it rolled to shallow right, giving Dan Uggla no time to make a play. Something that only happens when nothing seems to be going your way. As the Cardinals celebrated and prepared for celebrations, the Braves' chances to win dropped to 10% after Chipper Jones struck out to lead off the bottom of the 13th. Their chances to win actually went up by 10% after a Dan Uggla walk with some rookie named Freddie Freeman coming up to bat. After working a full count, Freeman pulled a grounder to first baseman John Mayberry, he threw it to Jimmy Rollins at second, he threw it back to him, and it was all over for the Braves. A 10.5 game lead, and any World Series hopes completely dashed. But for the Cardinals, the celebrations began. They had made an insurmountable comeback to take the NL wildcard and set up a series with the team they were just rooting for, the Philadelphia Phillies, who just set a franchise record for wins. While the NL wildcard was set, the AL wildcard was still up in the air as the clock moved closer to midnight. As the Rays and Yankees moved to the 12th, the Red Sox blew a chance for insurance after Ryan Lavarnway grounded into a double play with the bases loaded in the top of the ninth. But they still had an 80% chance to win, and in 2011, the Red Sox were 77-0 when leading after 8 innings. And with the Red Sox all-time save leader, Jonathan Papelbon, coming in, they felt very confident. And they had even more confidence after Papelbon got 2 quick outs. The Red Sox had a 95% chance to win, and they assumed they would soon be watching how things would unfold in the locker room like the Cardinals had just done. But then, Chris Davis stepped to the plate, and he wasted no time by hitting a first pitch double down the right field line. Then after 2 straight swings and misses, Nolan Reimold laced a double in the right center gap, bringing in pinch runner Kyle Hudson, and suddenly, they were tied. And after taking 2 pitches, as the clock moved past midnight, Robert Andino lined a pitch to left. Carl Crawford dove, and it went just under his mitt. Reimold raced home as Crawford delivered a strike to home, but it wasn't in time. And within a matter of minutes, the Red Sox blew a 95% chance to win, and as the Orioles celebrated their coveted 69th win of the year, all the Red Sox could do now is wait, and hope their favorite team, the New York Yankees, could pull through for them. And well, they wouldn't have to wait long, as just minutes after the Orioles walked it off, news spread to Tampa, and fans of course cheered, with Evan Longoria coming to bat. And 6 pitches later, Longoria lined a pitch down the left field line, and everyone held their breath, wondering if the ball would go fair and have enough to clear the wall. And in a very rare instance, the Rays were glad they played in Tropicana, as the ball had just enough as it cleared the short left field wall by mere feet. And they had done it. They became the first team to ever overcome a 9-game deficit in the month of September, and did so in a game they were trailing by 7 runs in the 8th inning, and ending it the only way it could, with a walk-off home run, which wrapped up the wildest night in MLB history, that showcased the best of baseball, and for some, its absolute worst. And if September 28th, 2011 was a movie, we reached the part where everyone walks away, and we tell you what happened to them after. What makes this day even more memorable is what happened after. If you are one who believes the Cardinals have some sort of devil magic, then it was at full display in 2011. After going down 2-1 against the greatest Phillies team of all time, they forced a Game 5, and in that game, Chris Carpenter outdueled Roy Halladay with a complete game shutout as the Cardinals won 1-0. They then beat the winners of their division, the Milwaukee Brewers, in 6 games in the NLCS to make the World Series. The only thing that could make this entire story even more unbelievable is if the Rays and Cardinals met in the World Series, but instead, the Cardinals went up against the Rangers. After they defeated the Rays in 4 games, then defeated the Tigers, who just defeated the Yankees in 6 games. Then, as many know, the 2011 Cardinals made their entire story even more legendary by what happened in that World Series. After going down 3-2, in Game 6, the Cardinals were down to their last strike twice. And both times, they kept their hopes alive by tying the game. Then in the 11th, the man who tied the game in the 9th, David Freese, hit a walk-off home run to send the series to the 7th game, where they went on to win their 11th World Series, adding much more to the magnitude of September 28th, 2011. And overall, the long-term impact of this night seems to be rather unnoticed. It actually didn't take long to have an effect, as the following season was the first year of the wildcard game, which was in part influenced by this entire ordeal on the September night. And as fate would have it, in the first ever wildcard game, the Braves and Cardinals met, which would have happened if this rule was in place in 2011. And while September 28th, 2011 was a day Braves fans want to forget, October 5th, 2012 was also a day Braves fans want to forget, as this was the infamous infield fly rule game, when in the 8th inning, as the Cardinals led 6-3, Pete Kozma and Matt Holliday went after a ball in shallow left field, and the ball dropped. But an infield fly rule was called, meaning Andrelton Simmons was out. Then afterwards, there was a 19-minute delay after Braves fans were nice enough to throw their trash on the field instead of leaving it under their seat. The Cardinals would go on to win, and this controversial game only happened in large part to what happened last year. And on the AL side, the long-term effects were most felt with the Red Sox and a team not even a part of the cast in this video, the Chicago Cubs. After the collapse, the Red Sox parted ways with both manager Terry Francona and GM Theo Epstein. After a year off, Francona would sign with Cleveland, and just weeks after the Red Sox season ended, Epstein would become the general manager of the Chicago Cubs. And after a few years of rebuilding in both Cleveland and Chicago, Epstein's Cubs would face off against Francona's Indians in the 2016 World Series. And John Lester, who pitched that final game in 2011 for Boston, would pitch in Game 7 of the 2016 World Series, where the Cubs would end a 108-year drought and end the curse of the Billy Goat by completing a 3-1 comeback over Cleveland, making this the second time Theo Epstein was at the helm as the team ended a long drought and curse. And to add even more, the manager of that 2016 Cubs team was Joe Maddon, who was the manager of the Rays in 2011. So in this sense, if the Red Sox wouldn't have collapsed and the Rays wouldn't have made the comeback, we can at least assume Francona and Epstein would have remained in Boston. And we'll never know how things would have ended. Maybe the Cubs drought would still be going on. Maybe the Red Sox wouldn't win the World Series in 2013. Maybe Nelson Cruz would have caught that ball in the World Series. Maybe the world would have ended in 2012. We will never know the answers to these questions, but we do know that the night of September 28th, 2011, will go down as a night that impacted the next decade of baseball and is, in my opinion, the wildest night in MLB history. That is until we see the night where every team finishes the season 81-81.